Hello, this is Christine. Welcome to our photography workshop chat and Q&A. Over the next hour, Captain Jeffrey, Sarah, and I will discuss all things photography aboard the David B with our two photo instructors, John D'Onofrio and Alan Sanders. We'll be setting sail on a narrative journey aboard the David B to explore our photo workshops in Alaska and the San Juan Islands of Washington State. You'll learn about each of our workshops' itineraries and which ones are right for you. We'll also be discussing the transformative experiences that we and our guests discover when you merge the essence of nature with the art of photography. In many ways, our workshops are a gateway to seeing the world in a new light, guided by the photographic expertise and passion of John and Al, as well as the excitement that Jeffrey and I have in sharing our love for the natural world. Our workshops go deeper than just saying stand here for best picture. We give you the space to explore, experiment, and grow as a photographer. We take great joy in taking you places like Pat Creek, which gives you the opportunity for up-close encounters with brown bears, or if you prefer landscape photography, our itineraries in Glacier Bay National Park and the fjords of Tracy Armford's Terror Wilderness will immerse you in stunning wild scenery for taking some of the most breathtaking landscape photos imaginable. Our workshops bring into focus some of the most astounding scenery, from the sheer walls and cascading waterfalls of Fjord's Terror to the humbling tidewater glaciers that rumble, pop, crack, and send house-sized pieces of ice crashing into the water below. These landscapes are so spectacular, I sometimes hardly believe they're real, even after 18 years of operation. So whether you're a seasoned photographer or brand new to the art, our workshops are crafted to inspire, challenge, and transform your approach to seeing and to the art and joy of photography. So gear up and tune in as we shed light on our fun and transformational photography workshops aboard the David B.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm just going to be starting here with everybody. We're going to be starting our presentation. Hopefully you can see myself, Sarah Kirkish, Christine and Jeffrey Smith, Al Sanders, and John D'Onofrio on our thumbnails. And then Christine is sharing her screen with our PowerPoint presentation on our photography workshops. I'm going to have everybody, for just clean housekeeping and our recording for later, I'm going to have everybody muted and have their videos turned off. So if you do have questions, please type them into the chat room and we will make sure that everybody's got a chance to ask questions. We'll make time for questions at the end. And we're going to be covering quite a few things about our upcoming 2024 photography workshops on the David B. So far we have, let's make sure I've got everybody admitted who wants to be in. So we are just having right now, I think right now we have about 15 people participating. I'll keep a track of and keep admitting people as they join, in case we have some late joiners. But again, my name is Sarah Kirkish, and I'm just happy to have everybody joining us today for our photography workshops on the David B. Again, we have Christine Smith and Jeffrey Smith, Al Sanders, John D'Onofrio, and we're going to be talking about our workshops, the places we go, and some of the things you're expecting to see if you join us on one of our workshops, as well as a tour of the boat and why we think the David B is a great place to have a photography workshop. We've been doing it for the last 7 years with John and Al. And with that, I think I'm going to just turn this over to Christine and Jeffrey, and they can continue on with the slideshow.
Hey, you want to go first?
No, go, all you.
All me. Okay, yeah, well, thank you and welcome. We're Christine and Jeffrey Smith. We own and operate the motor vessel David B. We've been doing this since 2006, and in 2017, we joined forces with John and Al to bring people photography workshops because I enjoy photography as much as they do, and we figured the David B would be a really good platform for photography. So to get started, again, welcome, Christine and Jeffrey. We're going to talk about some of our destinations in the workshops. We're going to talk a little bit about us, Al's background, John's background, the David B. We'll give you some FAQs, do a recap, and then we'll have time at the end for a Q&A.
The two of us bought the boat back in '98. We thought we would be running a couple years after that, and it ended up taking us 8 years before we were able to get the boat restored and able to run. And we both, I had been working on tour boats before that, and so had Christine. And both of us are captains now. and take over at different times, driving for each other. So we have lots of experience in actually running the boat, and the boat is set up the way we wanted because we actually did the restoration for it.
And then Sarah, why don't you give us a little background on you and how you became our reservation specialist, our CAT staff, our shoreside person, basically our everything.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be a passenger on the David B back in 2010. And then shortly after that, found myself in Bellingham, where I got to be summer CAT staff in 2012. And had such a great time. Certainly was happy to help Jeffrey and Christine. I did a little deckhanding at that point, but then somewhere in 2014 in the fall, I just asked, can I please help you with reservations? And because they've been doing it all themselves, and just started there. And so it's hard to believe I'm going to be here for the last 10 years as part of the Northwest Navigation, but I'm happy to answer questions for people. I love talking to potential passengers and answering their questions, and then just shore support, whatever needs to be shipped up to Alaska, I'm happy to do it. And I get to be in Bellingham in the summer and in Albuquerque, New Mexico during the winters. And you can see on my slide and on my head, I am an avid yarn artist, so I like to make things with yarn. So that's what I like to do, and that's why I'm happy here to help and also answer any questions. Again, if you have questions and you're a participant, please just have them in the chat room. And with that, we'll turn it over to John and Al's bios.
Why don't you tell us about you and how you came to photography and what you like about it and your background?
Sure. So I've been making photographs for an embarrassingly long period of time, something north of 40 years. I got involved in photography pretty much in college, where I was a fine arts major and I was studying painting. This was at Rutgers University on the East Coast near New York. And I was really into painting at the time, and just sort of accidentally found myself in a darkroom class, was captivated by the magic of the darkroom, and also the possibility of actually earning a living as a photographer versus as a painter. So from there, I done a number of things professionally in my life. I was actually a school photographer for a little while. And let me tell you, being with the grizzly bears in Alaska is nothing compared to being with middle schoolers doing school photography. But I have had my work published in a variety of magazines, calendars, coffee table books. I've written 2 books. I'm a filmmaker, and I also publish and edit Adventures Northwest magazine here in the Pacific Northwest. I've done that for something like 13, 14 years. And Al and I actually have been working together as co-teachers, kind of a unique arrangement, for something like 8 years now. We started off leading workshops at the North Cascades Institute, and we've been teaching workshops on the David B now for 7 years. And, I've had a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great gigs in my life. I can't think of any that are better than this one, though. The experience of being out on the David B for 8 days, just, breathing in beauty 24/7, being immersed in visual spectacle and being surrounded by people who are passionate about it. It's my idea of a good time.
All right. Al, you're up next.
So I've been making photographs for also an obscene amount of time, probably 40 some years. Started seriously doing this in the 70s. I had a darkroom rental business for a while, darkroom and studio rental. And that's actually where I started teaching. We've quickly figured out that the best way to generate business for the darkroom rental was to teach people how to use the darkroom. So that was my first teaching experience. And then from there, I ended up teaching at the University of Alaska in Anchorage. This was in the mid 80s. I taught here in Bellingham at Western Washington University. And I'm still teaching at the local community college, Whatcom Community College. So I've been teaching since the mid 80s. So John had a chance to photograph kids in schools. Here's my little confession for similar to that is, I don't know if I've told anybody this before, but when I was doing commercial photography, I also had the contract at one of the malls. This is when I lived in Anchorage, doing Santa photos at Christmas. And yes, the grizzly bears are infinitely easier to deal with. Although I gotta admit, I never had a problem with a kid. If there was a problem, it was usually with a parent, but it was actually kind of fun, but it was grueling. It was particularly grueling. But I have been teaching for a long time. I no longer do commercial work. I came to the digital imaging pretty early on. I was an early adopter of Photoshop, but I waited until the digital camera business settled down before I jumped into digital cameras. What I started doing was scanning film and then working with scans inside Photoshop. And then when Lightroom came along, I jumped into that as well. I'm actually currently, see how this goes. It's a long process, but I'm actually working on writing a book on Lightroom. It's a long process. But it's a lot of fun. I'm having fun doing it, but we'll see how that goes. And now I just concentrate on my own fine art photography, and I just absolutely love teaching. It's just entirely too much fun. That's what I know.
Okay. We'll do some quick facts here about the David B. And the boat was built in 1929. It was built originally to work in the Bristol Bay fishery with the world's largest sockeye salmon run. It's 65 feet long. Its depth, or it draws 7 feet. And then we can take up to 8 passengers. And then we have John and Elle as instructors. And then there's me, Jeffrey, and we have another crew member who's on board as well. Every stateroom has a private head, marine toilet, sink, and then we have a shared bathroom. And then because this is important, there's always electricity on. This year we're going to have 2 generators instead of 1. And so we always have always on electricity. We have water makers, and we use that for our drinking water. And that kind of gives you a quick summary of the boat. Do you have anything to add to that?
No.
So we're going to do a quick poll here, and Sarah will conduct this. It is, where are you joining us from? And I know, do you need to bring that one up, Sarah?
I have launched the poll. Hopefully everybody should be able to join. We have about 15 people who are currently on. We're getting some answers in here, so we'll just give that about a minute. And we kept it to the US at this time, but we do have passengers who join us from Australia and other countries, although we tend to have mostly Australians if they're going to be coming from another country. And looks like I've got pretty much everybody who is participating has answered. So I'm going to end the poll and we can look at the results. And it looks like about a third of our participants are participating from the Pacific Northwest, a couple from the West Coast, Northern Midwest, Northeast, and I think that's about it. So I'm going to stop sharing with that, and we're going to move on. And again, if you do have questions, anyone, feel free to type that into the chat room, and we'll get to that question later on after the presentation.
Go ahead.
We have 4 different kinds of trips that we do with John and Al that are the photography workshops. And we'll go through each one of those trips one at a time. But we basically have our trip where we go to the Brown Bear Observatory, sit on the beach, and get very good close shots of bears. We have a concession to run in Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve. And so we do one of our photography workshop trips there. We also have another trip that's in the area of the fjords that are just south of the Juneau area. That's the Tracy Arm, Ford's Terror Wilderness, and also on Admiralty Island in that trip. And so those are our trips. Actually, that one doesn't include it. That one's just in the fjords.
Yeah.
And then in the fall, when we return to the Bellingham area, we offer a trip out in the San Juan Islands. And you can see here, there's a bunch of details about each of those, but we'll go through each of the different types of trips that we offer. The first one is our trip that goes to the Brown Bear Observatory. It's called Pack Creek, and it's on Admiralty Island. It's in the Juneau area in Southeast Alaska. And this trip, we get to spend part of one day and then part of the next day, usually, actually on the beach in a place where we can sit and observe, photograph these brown bears. Admiralty Island has the highest concentration of brown or grizzly bears in all of the world. And this particular spot, they are very used to humans being there to take pictures of them and to watch them, but they are definitely wild animals. It's pretty exhilarating to sit there and be this close to these bears.
And then John, Al, do you want to add anything to that about what makes this trip, besides the bears, a pretty exciting place?
Oh, the trip is phenomenal from start to finish. I mean, just to speak to the experience with the bears, I've had the privilege of being there now, I don't know, 4 or 5 different occasions, never failed to have fantastic opportunities to photograph the bears. And the other thing about it is, unlike a lot of places that are famous, where people go, like Brooks Falls, different places around the world where people congregate to photograph bears, it's become kind of a mob scene. And I understand that in some of these places now, they give you a little buzzer like they give you at a restaurant. And when the buzzer goes off, you get to step forward to where you can photograph the bear. You've got 15 minutes and then you've got to move out of the way. Situation at Pat Creek is completely different. You spend hours and hours and hours, and there's more bears than people. It's usually just our groups, 7, 8 people surrounded by these bears. And we've seen behaviors that range from mating, mothers and cubs playing and rolling around in the water, fishing. I mean, it is, if you like wildlife photography, I think, has to be one of the world's best opportunities. And it's so respectful of the bears. It doesn't have a circus atmosphere, like I said. And the rest of the trip, I mean, the bears are obviously a highlight, but we also always see lots of whales. We see scenery like this in the fjords leading up to Admiralty Island. It's really from the minute we leave the dock to the minute we get back, there is not a moment that is mundane on this trip. It's just spectacular.
And just another comment about the bear viewing is, I think, if I remember right, the maximum number of people allowed at Pat Creek is 24 people per day. That's it. And like John was saying, more often than not, we're the only ones there. We've got this whole place to ourselves. And we had some people on our trip last year who, I forget what their title was, but they're like bear ambassadors in was it Yellowstone?
Grand Tetons.
Grand Tetons. Thank you. That's right. And so that's what they do. They're volunteers, but that's what they do in the Grand Tetons, is help manage the crowds. And they were with us at Pat Creek, and they said this was their best bear experience ever. Just because they're up close and personal, just like you can see here. And we're the only ones there. There's nobody else around. It's just very unique in that sense.
It's a pretty spectacular place. And because we are limited to the number of people who can go there, it gives you a chance not only to wait and watch for the bears to come out, but also to observe other things while we're there. And so besides Pat Creek, as we said earlier, we go into Tracy Arm and Ford's Terror Wilderness, which is on the mainland. And this is a place in there that John took this photo. And we'll share a couple more images from there. Some of the highlights we have from this trip is in this area, these beautiful glacier carved canyons, and then also the glaciers themselves, plus the still water. This is at the entrance to the fjords there. That's one of your pictures, John, right?
Yeah, we often anchor, that's Round Island.
Round Island
right here. And what a place to sit on the top deck and watch the sun go down at the end of a spectacular day.
There's lots of ice.
We might see some ice.
I really enjoy taking the boat up to the ends of the fjords where the glaciers are calving ice into the fjords. And it's especially amazing on these photography workshop trips because we're able to get people really close to the ice and get really great shots of all the ice that's calved off of these glaciers that are at the end of the two fjords there.
And the ice is an incredible subject. So here's a few pictures from Al. This looks like Ford's Terror, right?
I believe that's McBride.
No, I think it's Ford's. I see the Narrows in the background, I think.
Oh, yes, I know where. Yes, you're right. Correct. I remember. Well, coming back to me.
Yes.
Don't argue navigation with Christine now.
Yeah.
I didn't win that argument.
Yeah. Do you see the slide earlier about her license?
Yeah, right. That's Ford's Terror.
Yeah. And so that's in the back. So this is an area that we go into in the skiff. I usually don't take the big boat back there, but it's a skiff right in the back. And the scenery back there is pretty unbelievable.
Ford's Terror is by far, it's one of my favorite places on the planet. It's just spectacular. The way I've described it is if you can imagine Yosemite Valley, but instead of driving in a car, you're in a boat and you're the only ones there.
Instead of 40,000 other people, it's you and 7 other people in the boat. Oh, and the other thing is that the waterfalls are higher in Ford's Terror.
And there's gazillions of them. And any one of these waterfalls in Ford's Terror, anywhere else in North America would have a 600-car parking lot and a gift shop. And these don't even have names.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal.
And I think it really is a beautiful place to go in and take photos, because even though there aren't any glaciers in the back of Ford's Terror, a lot of the ice that we see comes from in the Ford's Terror area comes from Dawes Glacier, which is another glacier a little ways up. And so here's another image from Al.
We might see some ice.
Yeah. And I can't remember if this is yours or John's, but to get back to this area in the back of Ford's Terror, we have to go through this little cut of water. And it may look pretty traumatic right now, but it's a reversing tidal rapid. So as the tide comes up, fills in, then it smooths, and then we're able to access that back area.
And that's why there's nobody else up there.
Yeah.
It's not very many boats can get through there.
Like I said earlier, I love the ice. And one of the parts of this trip, also, we definitely spend some time drifting around out in front of the face of the glacier, watching the glacier calve. And if you're lucky, getting really good pictures like this.
Some of these chunks that fall from the glaciers are like the size of a 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not just the really grand, spectacular things. This area also is a place where there's old ancient forests, and we have the opportunity to go into the woods and spend time searching for some of the more delicate subjects out there, like the shy maiden flower. And then, of course, there's whales, lots of humpback whales, occasionally run into killer whales. And we don't always go for the really big stuff. Like I said, sometimes it's really enjoyable to spend time with some of the smaller wildlife subjects as well. And here's a few images of what it looks like on the boat. If you're a photographer, this is some folks or a woman who is taking a picture of Dawes Glacier as we're pushing up to the ice to get a little bit closer. And here's what it's like to be taking pictures in the skiff.
The skiff is an absolutely amazing platform for photography. It's incredibly stable, and it's just a wonderful platform for photography. This is in Ford's Terror.
And this is one of the areas where we go at low tide, and you can really see this woman here is having a good time getting up close with some of the barnacles and things that are on the beach there. So this is sort of a summary of our Fjords and Brown Bear tour. The dates this year are May 26th through June 2nd, and it's a round trip out of Juneau. And you can see here are some of the highlights of what you get with that trip. And then if you want to scan that QR code, that'll actually take you to the webpage for the Alaska Fjords and Coastal Brown Bears. Guys got anything else to say with that? We will move on to Glacier Bay. And
one of the things that's having done this for as long as we have, one of the things that we've gotten along the way are permits to operate in a bunch of areas that are limited entry. So like the Pat Creek spot where they limit it to a certain number of people per day, they also have a limited number of actual operators who have permits to take people there. The same is true in Glacier Bay. We're one of a small select group of boats our size that have permits to operate in the national park. And so I think that's one of the things that makes this really special. That you can go see this for several hours, maybe really briefly, real fast, zip through on a cruise ship. But if you actually want to get there and see it and spend some time and be able to take some pictures in a really amazing spot, you need to go on a boat that has permits to be there. And one of the things that's nice is that we have permits for Glacier Bay.
Yeah, and we get to go ashore in some spectacular places where what we call ice gardens. You know, you were talking about photographing the ice before. So beautiful, so sculptural, both floating in the water and beached oftentimes at the mouths of inlets.
One of the glaciers that we often go take a look at is McBride. Mm-hmm. And it's receded a huge amount in the last 30 years or so. And we're able to get up there once again because of our wonderful skiff. We can get into these very shallow spots. The entrance to this little side fjord is very shallow. And we can get up there and spend time in places that very, very few people in any given year are in. So a little more of the pictures of ice, the kind of things that we're able to capture from these trips.
And there's certainly lots of time of year that we're there is in June. So there's lots of wildflowers that we're able to photograph. And it is a trip that we do spend a lot of time. We get to go ashore quite a bit. It is at Reed Glacier. And it's a fun place to, right now, from the side, on the right side there, you can access the face of the glacier by walking along the side of it. And so this past season, we were able to actually access the glacier itself. But then the mud flats, as you can see this picture from John, has a lot of really interesting texture and is a really beautiful spot.
You know, there's an awful lot of light every day that far north. Thank God for that, because there are so many things to photograph.
This beach that this picture is taken from is one of three places that we go ashore where at low tide, the icebergs ground out on these spots, and you can go wander around in amongst them and get great pictures, including glaciers in the background. But this is one of those spots where you can walk right up to the ice and get really cool really good pictures.
Yeah, and I've sort of been going between John and Al's pictures here so you guys get a taste of what their photography styles are. So we're back into some of Al's images, and you can see he's got a lot of, has a great eye for definitely black and white. And also some of his color pictures are just beautiful too. So here's another image of McBride Glacier area. This is in the Muir Inlet, and you can see the David B. Anchored back there, and ice is sort of grounded out there, and the color that the ice is often just so spectacular. And here's another image from Reed Glacier, and then some of the beautiful ice that's just floating by the boat. And you guys want to say anything about the mountains?
The Fairweather Range.
Yes.
Just unbelievable. The name is sort of ironic because it's more often than not, you can't see the peaks because they're up in the clouds. But when they blow away, it's dramatic. Doesn't even begin to capture it. You know, it's truly awe-inspiring if you like big mountains. Mount Fairweather, I believe, is at the highest mountain in British Columbia. In Canada.
I believe it's the highest mountain in Canada. Correct.
It could be. It's right on the border. And yeah. I mean, these are 15,000 foot peaks.
Something like that, yeah.
And obviously that far north, they're glaciated almost from water level. So the amount of glaciation and the tactile alpine appearance is breathtaking. It's, you know, people have said that it's more visually dramatic than the Himalaya. I haven't been in the Himalaya, but I can imagine that it might be.
Yeah. So besides the really beautiful scenery that Glacier Bay has, it also is really diverse with wildlife. The stretch between where we leave in Juneau out of to Glacier Bay itself is an area where humpback whales will often come to cooperatively feed together. So what you're seeing here is something called bubble net feeding. So they get together, they circle around, they make a big net around some of the fish, and then come up together all at one time. And so here you can see their tongues and their baleen and everything. And if you're interested in humpback whales, this is your best bet for the opportunity to possibly get to see the bubble net feeding.
Yeah, I've been on whale watching trips in the past, but I haven't seen a whole lot of humpback whale tongues until I went on the David B.
Yes. And then people often ask what some of the most interesting birds are. Glacier Bay is also another where you could see puffins. There's an island that we visit in Glacier Bay that has a number of puffin nests. And then there are a couple other places along the way that we'll see puffins as well. Sea otters, if you've ever wanted to see sea otters, they have them everywhere. You'll definitely get pictures of sea otters there. And some of the other animals include grizzly bears and mountain goats and killer whales. So it's also it's a great place if you want to do both landscape photography and focus on the variety of wildlife that Glacier Bay finds itself abundant in.
Moose, right? Yeah. Occasionally wolves.
Oh, wolves. Yes. How did I forget wolves? Yeah, we do occasionally get to see wolves. And then my favorite bird, which is this one here, which is an oyster catcher. I think it's a bird that has parts from all the other birds, basically a long orange beak, funny pink feet. It's a great bird.
Designed by committee.
Definitely designed by committee. And so
And the committee had a sense of humor.
Yeah, yeah. And this is kind of a typical anchorage for us in Glacier Bay. It has a little bit more ice at times than some of the other ones do, but it's a really beautiful location. And this is in Tart Inlet. If you've ever been on a cruise ship that went to Glacier Bay, he went directly into this. You spent a little bit of time in the cruise ship looking at Marjorie Glacier, and then you turned away and went out. We tend to try to stay at least a whole night over there, spend the day, and then maybe a little bit the next morning doing photography there. And this is another image. This is one of my favorite pictures from our time in Glacier Bay. I was on the boat about a mile away. I had my big lens on and I could see the skiff kind of there with everybody. And this kind of demonstrates just how stable the skiff is. They're actually more than a quarter mile away from the face of Marjorie Glacier. So a little bit of foreshortening in this. It makes them look like they're right up against the glacier and there's going to be a big wall of water coming out at them, but not quite that exciting, but still exciting.
Still pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
And they're all standing.
I know.
It's a very stable skiff.
And that's how stable the boat is. That skiff is truly amazing.
You never forget a moment like that.
Yeah.
So John had early on this in Glacier Bay, he mentioned the ice gardens. Here's John in his happy place in the ice gardens. So
Note the T-shirt. That's not typical.
Yeah. T-shirt, warm sunny day. Yeah. But this is at Lamplugh Glacier, which is a really amazing place to go ashore and wander between the icebergs. And there's just a lot of really beautiful scenes to capture there. And it's kind of coming and going from the skiff. This is at McBride Glacier or McBride Inlet.
You know, most of these kinds of workshops, when they go ashore, they're using Zodiacs, which I'm sure are fine, but there's no comparison between a rubber raft, basically, with a motor behind it and our wonderful skiffy.
Yes.
Skiffiosaurus,
because it's so big. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no comparison.
Yeah. So this year, Glacier Bay dates are June 6th through 13th, and also leaves out of the north end of Juneau. And there's some of the things that we focus on, which is landscape and wildlife photography. And we didn't talk about it on the last trip, but all of them, all of our trips, we spend a lot of time in Lightroom and helping you guys out with post-processing.
Yeah, that's an important point. I've had numerous people in the workshops express gratitude having taken other workshops that they described as sort of being escorted around from place to place and being told where to point their camera. We really do a deep dive on photo processing in Lightroom and also compositional theories. We take the educational part of it very serious. We've got an LCD projector and a screen on board, and there's an opportunity if you already know Lightroom, there's always more to know. And really, it sounds like a cliche, but it's a great opportunity to take your photography to the next level because there is so much involved between being captivated by a scene and creating a piece of art out of your vision, but that's what we do.
Yeah.
I just want to highlight that this is one of our most popular trips. And of course, at this point, we only have 4 spaces available in 2 cabins. So please, scan that QR code if you're interested before we go on to our next trip.
Yeah. But before we go on to our next trip, we've got another poll.
Oh, I better get on that poll. So the next poll is where we like to ask, we've been doing a lot of talking here, but what sorts of subjects do you like to capture with your photography? And so I have opened up the poll here. You have various choices to choose from. We're just going to have people chime in whether they like landscapes or wildlife or textures, and you can click as many as you want. It's not just a single choice there. So looks like we've got about pretty much everybody who's participating is answered. So I'm gonna end the poll here.
I like that diversity. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and share the results. So the nice part is that pretty much everybody likes everything, but the landscapes, the wildlife, the flora, and the the textures all seem to be on the top 4 there. So with that, we're going to move on to our next trip.
And this is the trip we talked about earlier that stays in the fjords itself. So we leave out of Juneau. We spend one night at this very interesting abandoned cannery, and we've got some time to walk around that. It's very visually interesting with all sorts of ruins there. And then we spend the rest of the time in Tracy Arm and Ford's Terror. This trip this year is in July, and it's a great time of year because, again, there's lots of light. And so we've got all day and late into the evening to be taking photos.
It's really a spectacle of waterfalls, spending time in the fjords. And in addition to that, the glaciers have only recently moved out. So the walls of the fjords are often carved and scoured by the passing ice into fantastic patterns. It's like moving through an art gallery. It's just spectacular.
It's really a spot for landscape, but we definitely also see lots of wildlife in these places as well. But the conditions are right, that there's often this kind of misty scene in the fjords. This time of year for this trip, there'll still be lots of alpine snow, and so there'll be lots of waterfalls from that. Later in the year, if it's been a low snow year, there are slightly fewer waterfalls, but this time of year, it's usually still running. Things are running pretty well. And it's definitely a very amazing spot to go into. Here's a non-misty version of the same thing, but
you typically get a mixed bag. And on those misty days, you're moving along through the fjords and pass a piece of floating ice that is the bluest blue you've ever seen. There's this idea, I think, that dates back to the Renaissance of the sacred blue, the sacre bleu, which is a pigment that the painters of the era were forbidden to use because it harkened up the color of heaven and was considered blasphemous. And these floating icebergs, particularly on a gray day, to me really capture the essence of that kind of color. It's the best blue that I've ever seen.
But we do see wildlife.
We do see wildlife, yeah. And
because of how far north this area is, and also because of the salt water, there are lots of things like the goats that come down from the alpine, which isn't very high up. They come down to the water's edge. So we often get pretty amazing shots of goats in this area. Of course, there are lots of seals.
yeah. Yeah, one of the things that makes this particular area pretty exciting is that seals come to pup. They have their babies on ice floes, so we often get to see a lot of the seals, and they're young in that time frame. But it does also draw killer whales, so there's also an opportunity that we might get to see killer whales. And we've seen both brown and black bears in the fjords, as well as lots of different types of birds. So big flocks of surf scoters, white-winged scoters, lots of bald eagles, tons of different birds. And it's just, it's a really beautiful location.
This is the back of Ford's Terror.
And some more.
More Ford's Terror.
Yeah.
More ice.
Yes.
See some ice.
Good area to see ice. And late in the summer, people ask about this all the time. Do we see northern lights? Very once in a while. So this was from this past season. We don't usually get to see, it doesn't get dark enough until sort of the early part of August, late part of July. And you have to have a moonless night pretty much and a clear night. And this was a really, really unusual thing. But there's always a chance once it's a bit later in the summer that you might be able to get to see northern lights.
And you can opt in. The deckhand stays up all night, and you can opt in to ask him to knock on your door should the northern lights come out.
And here's a few people on deck taking some pictures at a waterfall called Ice Falls. It's one that we're able to get up really close to. This is in Tracy Arm. And this is kind of what it looks like coming up to the face of Dawes Glacier. And this looks like it was an early season image. There's still some snow up on the mountains there. And if you're interested in coming on a trip with us, definitely bring your rain gear and layers. The glacier days can be really, really chilly with the wind coming off the face of the glacier.
This is the recap of that. That trip this year is on July 9 through the 16th. It starts and ends in Juneau. And as you've seen, there's lots of the landscape photography, lots of wildlife, and we definitely get to experience lots of glacier viewing while we're on these trips.
I think the Tracy Arm and Ford's Terror is clearly underrated. I mean, everybody's heard of and knows of Glacier Bay. This is almost as spectacular, and it's clearly underrated. It just flies under the radar.
I think in some ways more spectacular.
In some ways, it's more spectacular.
I think what makes it really exciting is when you compare Glacier Bay to the fjords is Glacier Bay is a much more wide open environment. So the fjords there aren't as tall. It's a different type of rock. Here it's a granite that's been carved, and you're in these just deep, deep valleys, and it just makes for an incredible, just kind of humbling experience in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it just has flown under the radar.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
Every bit is spectacular.
Yeah, and then
we come back in the fall.
Yeah,
back. When I say back, we come back south to Washington State. And in the fall, we offer a photography workshop in the San Juan Islands. The San Juans are a little cluster of islands in the northwest corner of the state of Washington, all well in from the ocean and protected. And these trips have the same kind of mix of landscape and wildlife stuff. There definitely are lots of dramatic views. This is a really famous lighthouse out there in the San Juans, and Mount Baker in the background.
Our resident volcano.
Yes. Nice to have one. And while I think of it as a more urban type of cruise, there are a lot of places that we're able to go that have a more natural feeling, but it also has a slightly more, I don't know, would you say built up? There's like more people stuff going on there, but it's still just, it's so beautiful, and lucky to get to go out to the San Juan Islands and see places like this.
And we tend to go to places that the state ferry does not go. So they're not as well worn.
Right. Yeah. The state marine parks, Susha, Peytos, and Mesha Islands, which are in the far northwest part of the archipelago, nobody lives there. Those are all just parks, and they're spectacular.
Yeah. And then also this was from Cyprus, which is a beautiful island with lots of trails on it. And it's a really fun place to go and explore. I'm not sure. Where is that at?
That's the tip of Ewing Island.
Oh, right. Yes.
That's the Sisters Range there in the distance. One of the things about the San Juans too is, besides the bucolic beauty of the islands, in the distance, all up and down the coast, you can see the spectacular Cascade Mountains, and in Canada, the Canadian Coast Range. So it's a beautiful setting.
We do a lot of hikes and go ashore a lot on these trips on some of the wonderful trails that are in these parks. And one of the things, there are lots of madrona trees. This is madrona bark right up close. Another view of that. It's just a fabulous photographic subject.
Just spectacular. No way to
those folks who said texture, boy, the San Juans offer a lot of texture.
Yes.
Like this is called tuffoni. It's sandstone that's been carved over the eons into these amazing patterns. And we figured out the places where, by having the tide and the light be in alignment, we can cruise along and these spectacular textural patterns in optimal light, very slowly from the skip. We call it the Wall of Fame in one place, where we can just go by and capture these remarkable sculptural sort of images.
Like I said, there's also wildlife out in the San Juans. We do pretty well.
The yaks.
Oh, I should have put the yak in. I totally forgot about that. Yes.
It's unexpected to find yaks, but there's actually yaks there.
Yeah. And you can see somebody who's getting into taking some of the sandstone photos, and that there's always something to laugh about.
And there's one of your yaks in the far right-hand side of the screen.
I'm never going to hear the end of this one.
All right. Are you really just going to leave them around your ankles?
They shamed me into sitting down and taking off my boots.
So here are some of the highlights for the San Juan Islands.
These trips are shorter.
Yep.
The other ones in Alaska are 8 days. These trips are 4.
And yeah, it's a great cruising destination. It takes us only a couple hours to get to where we're going from Bellingham. And there are a bunch of really beautiful, secluded places to go. There's great maritime history and a lot of wildlife. And then also, as I noted that this is the off season, and it makes the San Juans feel a little bit less crowded. And there's also a lot of beautiful, beautiful leaves this time of year. Our big leaf maples have just a gorgeous bright yellow quality to them, and definitely make it worth the San Juan Islands.
This is a great trip to get started on. So let's have our final poll here where we just talk about the types of trips that people have already been on. Let me go back to that and we'll launch that poll really quickly. In our last 10 minutes or so, we're going to go over features of the boat. But for now, let's see, have you been on what are your photo workshops experience? Have you been on lots? You've lost count? Is this your first time, or you've just never, but just kind of interested? And when we get pretty much everybody who've clicked on, then we'll share what some of our experiences of our participants here tonight. And looks like it's a mix. Certainly, we have a lot of experienced workshop photographers online tonight, but we've got some people who haven't ever been on one but are interested, and then only one workshop so far, whether it's on the David B or not. And then we've got several, 3 or 4 or more. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing that poll and we can move on to why we think the David B makes it special. If you haven't already guessed, we might be biased.
Yeah, just a little.
We made some changes to the David B a few years ago, specifically to make it better for what we were doing. And one of the things that we did was we added a lot more deck house structure with interior space that's really comfortable for what we do. This is the view from the wheelhouse of us heading up towards a glacier. And while it happens to be sunny out in this picture, it's also very nice when it's not sunny out to be in that pilot house. If you turn right around from the wheel there's this wonderful bench seat that we built so that people would be able to view what was going by from up there. This is 2 pictures of our stairs that go down below. All the staterooms are down below. And in the left picture, you're looking down the stairs towards the lower level. And on the right picture there, you can see once you get to the bottom of the stairs, how they're shaped there. Right at the bottom of the stairs, there's this bathtub. There's bathroom with a bathtub. And it's the shared bathroom. And it's also super comfortable. You want to take a shower as well, or a bath.
And then as you turn around from the head, you can see this is the hallway that takes you where our cabins are. We have 4 cabins down there, and then also a cabin for our deckhand. And right now we've got 3 cabins that are queen sized and 1 that has an over-under bunk. And then we just did a project where we can convert 2 of our cabins into bunk beds or queen size beds. If you give us a heads up before the trip, which arrangement you want the bunks in, we can arrange those. So we have lots of different arrangements of the cabins and how the beds are. So here you can see the cabin we call the Kita cabin. The door to the right has where the toilet is. The sink is there on the left, and then the double bunks. This one is the Chinook cabin.
This is one of the 2 that we converted this winter. Sadly, we don't have any pictures of it yet.
Yes, it's still under construction.
But it can be converted into 2 bunk beds.
And just so you know, these were taken with my cell phone, and they're really distorted. So while that doesn't actually look like a queen size bunk, it's a queen size bunk. And same with this one. This one's a queen size bunk as well. But we have this as sort of a way for you to see what the cabins with the heads look like. And then this is the other cabin that we converted, and this one can either be in that configuration, or we can drop the one side down and make it into 2 twins. So you turn around from back there, and we're going to head back up into the saloon. And this area is where we spend a lot of time with our workshops, and you can see the projector there. And so we're looking sort of at the top from the wheelhouse back towards the back of the boat. And then we put, I think, the next picture in. You can turn around and you can see where the stairs are, where the wheelhouse is. And then the following picture is kind of what it looks like during a workshop with Al teaching, people taking notes. We have little lap desks for computers and some of our curtains so that it kind of blacks out the light. And then these two images are just at the midships area. One shows our sort of passenger drink station. There's an ice maker below the sink there. There's a little cooler there for like beer and things. And then that's a door with some storage space.
We have a little coffee station behind that. Definitely need your coffee.
Yeah.
And then this is looking back into the galley, showing the whole table back there. We can fit all of the guests around the table.
Crew sometimes sits around a little further back, but yeah, no, the galley's a really great spot. And I spent a lot of time back there making all sorts of delicious things on my wood stove, which I think is the next image. Yeah, my wood stove. So everything is handmade, from the pastries to the bread, pasta, all sorts of stuff. So I use a lot of local seafood. And then if you do have some dietary restrictions, be sure to let Sarah know and we can talk and figure out what sort of stuff. And then I can plan my menu accordingly so that make sure everybody gets what they need.
I think a lot of people consider the food the best part of the trip. It's so good.
Thanks. Yeah. And then this is our
original engine from 1929 that we have kept working and is in wonderful restored condition.
That's
and
great.
It's kind of the heart of the boat.
And then we're going to head back out. This is from a photography workshop, some wildlife photography that we're doing there. And what's really great about the David B is there's a lot of rain and mist and stuff in Southeast Alaska. And when we made the big changes to the boat, we wanted to make sure that there was a lot of covered deck space. So when you're outside, you can be outside, you can take pictures, and you're not necessarily getting rained on.
And your shark suit won't get wet. Your orca suit won't get wet.
And so you can stay dry. We have dry orcas, but then also we have a lot of space on the upper deck outside. And so you can access that through this space back here. And our upper deck where we travel with the skiff. And then this whole area up here is great for whale watching, landscape photography, all sorts of stuff. So the boat is a really great platform for people who are just getting started with photography, people who have been taking photographs and going on workshops for a long time. And it's certainly something that we would love to take you on.
This is what John and Al were discussing earlier.
You're talking.
Yeah.
We mentioned the food.
Yeah, so that's halibut crepes with a Gruyere sauce, some vegetables, and some brown rice. I bet you we've got some, that's kind of a typical lunch, fresh crab, some bread, whiskey crab soup, and then, of course, croissants.
And I like to say that you'll gain just as much on one of our cruises as you would on one of the big cruises. There's never any
I often
risk of
recommend
starvation.
Yeah, no, we work you guys hard. You don't even gain any weight. And then here's a group from a couple years ago in Glacier Bay, and we thought we'd share a few testimonials with you.
One of my favorite parts about what I do is I really like that while we're taking people out to really focus on their photography, a lot of them come back with very deep transformations of themselves. And I think that that's one of the more amazing things that we can do. We take you out to see these things. You take a lot of pictures, but at the same time, it changes you.
Yeah. There's a lot of camaraderie that goes on with these trips.
Yeah.
And
Shared passion. And then for some people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, beauty is sort of a transcendent force. And to be surrounded and immersed in beauty like this can be almost a religious experience for people who are really into it.
yes, absolutely.
What Jeffrey was saying about it being a transformative experience, I've not only taught a lot of workshops, but I've also been on the other side. Over the years, I've taken many, many workshops. And often what I have realized is a lot of times what I get out of the workshop is a whole different way of viewing the world. And it doesn't often come right away. I don't realize it until after the fact that it changed the way I perceive things. And that's the beauty of a workshop, is the benefit often keeps on coming long after you've finished the workshop.
Yeah, and one of the things I think, to kind of expand on that a little bit, is that when we do our critiques, and like I can stand there and look at what everybody's taken pictures of, and instead of planting everybody in one spot with their cameras or their tripods, we encourage everybody to kind of explore a little bit, and we can all be on the same beach. We can all be looking at the same things, and everybody has a very different perspective of what they're seeing. And what makes that really exciting is that that's one of the ways that you're changed in how you see something. So I'll see somebody take a picture of something in some way that I hadn't never thought of to do it on my own. And then I'd be like, I want to try that. And I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy seeing our passengers and the participants kind of engage in while they're on the boat.
Yeah, people find their connection and then they go all in.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to say thank you for coming, and we're going to move into our question and answer thing. I see that there are a bunch of questions on the chat for Sarah to get to and ask us about, and we'll be here answering them as long as we need to.
Yeah, and one of the things we wanted to thank, we did go over a little bit, but you can tell we're passionate about both the experience that we're trying to offer on the boat, as well as what we think makes us unique for our photography workshops in the various places we get to go. I like to say, when we talk about all these inspiring places and breathtaking places, and we run out of adjectives. But I like to say it's not bragging if it's true. So we really do hope you'll consider one of our trips. And actually, as a thank you for those of you who are participating today, we wanted to offer you a special discount. We're going to offer a 25% discount on one of our upcoming trips for 2024. That's going to be through the next couple of weeks. So please get in touch with me after this. You've got my contact information here. And with that, I'm going to go through a couple of the questions that we've gotten, not too many. One was specifically, is there an age limit for our passengers? And we've definitely had a range of ages on our photography workshops.
We typically cut it off at about 120.
Yeah.
Yes,
Al's getting
I wasn't
there.
sure when you wanted, if there was an upper range or a
So
lower
I gotta quit pretty soon.
Yeah.
That's right. Your days are numbered, man.
Yeah. But we've had family.
How old was
I think he was
16?
Yeah.
Like then?
Guy that came with his grandmother.
With his grandma.
That was
He had a
fantastic.
great experience, man. It was inspiring to see him soaking it in.
And then there was a woman and her children, and they were in their late teens and early 20s.
They were high school kids. They were just
But in general, our passengers tend to be retired or have the time to be able to appreciate the trips themselves. And so I hope that answers the questions. The other comment we had was just a comment about Glacier Bay.
Let me just say one other thing about that. Is that, the landscapes are just absolutely spectacular, but the David B is really comfortable. It's a way to combine this authentic, you're really there, you're out there, but at the same time, life's pretty good in the boat. It's not harsh at all.
Also,
I'll give an example.
I've had classes with people who've asked, is there how young is too young? And my experience has been younger kids, high school kids, maybe even, well, not much younger than that, but you put kids like that into a room full of adults, and I've always seen them rise to the occasion and never had a problem.
It would depend on the adults.
Yeah. Yeah. To John's point about the comfort level on the boat, I do encourage, one of my inside tips that I give for passengers when they ask what they should pack is I always tell them to bring indoor outdoor slippers, because it's really cozy inside. You can wear them and, be inside and be comfortable. But then if there's wildlife, which happens, then you can go right outside to our covered decks and see that wildlife. So that's definitely one of my recommendations. I don't know if anyone has any other questions.
There are a few more there are a few more questions in the chat. One of them is the David B available to tour here in Bellingham? And the answer is yes. In the spring, when everything is all pretty and we're ready to go, fresh paint and all that, and everything's all cleaned up from all of our winter projects, we do an open house and we do viewings of the boat, and you get to hang out and talk to us. And if you have questions, that's a great time for it. And Sarah, what are the dates for that this year?
I believe they're the 13th and the 14th of April. That's Saturday, Sunday. And they're we consider them private tours, but they're up to about 6 passengers or guests at a time. We think that really works better for when we're showing people around the boat. They can see down and to see the cabins and talk more one-on-one. And if we started it in COVID times with keeping it to the smaller groups, but I think it's really worked out well for people to get their questions answered. So that's really nice.
And then another question was, how far north is the Alaska Fjord Strip? It's in the stretch just south of the Juneau area. And actually, if you are on our website, there's a map on the Alaska Fjords trip page that shows where that trip goes. It's probably most were 75 miles south of the Juneau area. And another question about internet connectivity. All the tour boats our size got Starlink last year, and we did too, and we love it. And it's kind of interesting because when we're away from town, the more wilderness the location, the faster the connection is. It's lightning fast when we're anchored miles and miles away from anybody else.
That we felt was really, we went back and forth about having internet connectivity for a long time about whether we should do it or not. Because one thing that had happened on most of our trips is the moment that we would get back into cell phone coverage, like the trip was over, there wasn't any cohesiveness, and it just sort of felt like things didn't really ever end, and people were always asking when they were going to get cell phone coverage. And now that we have it all the time, it just like it's in the background. And if you want to be connected, you can be. If you want to just turn it off, you can turn it off too. So,
good call.
Another question here said, I'm curious that very few are using tripods. Is there a way you instruct or not enough room? I think, Al and John?
That's an interesting question because we were just discussing that before we started this evening. Up until recently, we insisted on tripods. But the reality is, with the current version of Lightroom, there are ways to get high quality images without the use of a tripod. So now our recommendation is it's up to you. There are certain things that you can do that you cannot do without a tripod. If you want to do the slow shutter speed thing, yes, a tripod is to your advantage. Macro is often easier with a tripod, although there are workarounds for both of those. But for some people, carrying around a big, heavy tripod is a problem, and with mobility issues potentially. And so there are ways now to get around that with the current version of Lightroom Classic. So a tripod is now optional.
What Al's talking about is the new AI denoise functionality in Lightroom that enables a photograph captured at, say, 5,000, 10,000 ISO to have the noise basically sucked out of it, so it looks like something that was shot at 200. It's a mind-boggling advance. And
so go ahead.
It creates the opportunity to shoot it very high and still get really high-quality images that are printable large. So a lot of the reasons that shooting at high ISO has traditionally been a very bad idea have been mitigated. That said, there are other benefits to the tripod, which it slows down the process, right, creates more mindfulness in composition. Right. I'm not tossing my tripod yet, but there are circumstances where it does make sense. And obviously, you can't shoot from the boat on a tripod. I mean, that doesn't work. So it's a great thing to have, but if you don't want to use one, you can still come back with some amazing images.
Speaking of such, while we're talking about this, because we didn't mention this earlier, and John just sort of alluded to this, one of the things we do on all our photo workshops is make prints. On our way back, on the end of our trips, we actually have a printer, high quality printer on board, and everybody goes home with a 12 by 18 inch high quality print of one of your images.
I don't know if you guys have seen any other questions. I've only just gotten a few directly to me. One was, are there any combined itineraries? And what I could say is that if you want to do back-to-back photography workshops, you could do the Alaska Fjords with Pack Creek Bear trips and then immediately go to the Glacier Bay trip. Those are back-to-back, but otherwise they're standalone trips. But of course, if you want, if you wanted to do that, we could do that. So just let us know and we're usually pretty accommodating of people's schedules, but the trips themselves are on the schedule, and I have the schedule and rates page with you, as well as our photography workshops page. Christine and Jeffrey, have you seen any other chats that were directed to you specifically?
No, but
there is a question about when is that book coming out?
Yes.
I think that's for Al. Yeah.
That's for Al, yeah.
And I'll bet that was Kim.
Yes.
I'm working on it, Kim.
Yes.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, it's nice to see David on line too.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Unless there are any other questions, I thought we are over our time. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating. What we thought we would do is after this, when we stop our recording, then we can open it up for tile viewing, if you like, kind of an open meeting sort of format. But at this point, unless there are any other questions, thank you so much for participating in our questions and answers with our photographers, John and Al, Jeffrey and Christine. Christine, thank you so much for putting together the PowerPoint presentation. Thanks, John and Al, for all the photos. And with that, everybody, we hope to see you on our future trip.
There is one more question here.
Oh, is there? Okay, thank you.
And you can speak to this, Sarah. It asks about single supplement charges and how we deal with that.
Yeah. So in the past, what we've decided for our photography trips is that we are not going to be charging a single supplement at this time, but we do have that configuration with sharing options with some of our cabins that are now bunk beds. On our regular trips, though, we do charge a single supplement of 25%. If you want a private cabin or if you're willing to share, then we are willing to waive that at this time. And if you want to make a reservation, all we require is a 25% non-refundable deposit, and then the balance is due 90 days before the trip sails. And I will be your point of contact person if you have any other questions.
Also, there's a question about kayaks.
Kayaks? Lots of
We do have kayaks. We have 4 doubles and a single, and we have put people in kayaks on photography trips. It's a little bit less common. We do more of that on the non-photography workshop trips that we offer, only because of the amount of time that is available. But we've definitely done it, and it definitely works. And if you're interested in kayaking, I think it's a really amazing way to get very close up to the boundary edge between the water and the land, because you can kayak in just a couple inches of water. And it's a really amazing
and I'm always game
way
to go and kayak with somebody and take pictures. I'm daring enough to put my camera in the kayak, so I'm happy to do that. Oh, and drones. We need to talk about drones.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Glacier Bay National Park is a no for drones. They're not allowed to have drones, but when we're cruising to and from that area, we can have drones. And then we're also under a best management practice thing not to do drones in the fjords. But any place that we're outside of that, we're able to have drones on board. Or we can have, you can fly them.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Again,
And if you do have other questions,
yes,
Sarah is always able to answer any kind of questions like that you have about whatever.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. And in about a week, we will have our video replay sent out to everybody who registered. So if you want to share that, we're going to put that on Facebook too. And so we just want to be able to share with as many people as possible about our trips. So, all right. Well, with that, I think we're going to stop the recording and we'll open up the focus mode if people want to participate. Otherwise, feel free to log off. And thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.